The modern business ideal relies on absolute fluidity. Capital, information, and products must cross the globe without friction. Traditional geographic borders have largely been erased. Modern logistics, global sourcing, and digital communications allow a company to establish a presence anywhere on the map. The ultimate structural archetype for this level of integration is the borderless organization, a multinational corporation that seeks to eliminate artificial geographical barriers entirely. But while physical borders are now easy to cross, hidden internal borders remain highly restrictive. These internal barriers are human-centric. They are rooted in deep cultural dissonance and systemic bias operating below the surface of the organizational chart. Optimizing physical logistics yields little if a company ignores the deep-level human diversity required to actually run the system. Companies typically initiate geographic scale for basic operations, like exporting goods or setting up foreign subsidiaries. However, establishing a geographic footprint in multiple countries does not automatically result in a unified global strategy. A multi-domestic corporation attempts to scale by decentralizing management to the local country. This creates high responsiveness to local needs, but results in low overall efficiency due to the constant duplication of efforts. A global corporation takes the opposite approach. It centralizes decisions at headquarters for maximum efficiency and standardization, which often results in poor adaptation to local markets. The borderless model attempts to synthesize these extremes. It relies on a matrix structure utilizing cross-border teams and shared decision-making across global networks. This dependency on shared decision-making introduces a specific vulnerability. Unlike centralized or decentralized models, the matrix structure stalls completely when it encounters cultural friction between its global nodes. In theory, the borderless organization is an interconnected web. It rejects top-down command in favor of shared decision-making distributed across the network. The expected outcome is balanced efficiency. Knowledge and best practices flow freely across borders, driving integration. The critical flaw in this design is the assumption that all human capital operates on the exact same cognitive and cultural frequencies. A cross-border team possesses surface-level demographic diversity, but the friction occurs at the level of deep-level diversity. Deep-level diversity consists of fundamental differences in core values, beliefs, and problem-solving approaches. A borderless matrix structure is rendered useless if the internal teams are paralyzed by unmanaged deep-level cultural dissonance. To measure and predict this deep-level cultural friction, management relies on empirical frameworks like Hofstede's cultural dimensions. One of the sharpest points of tension in a global workforce is the balance between individualism and collectivism. An individualist worldview prioritizes personal rights, freedom, and self-expression, holding a strong belief that employees should be judged by their distinct personal achievements. Operational friction surfaces immediately when a standardized, performance-based procedure designed by an individualist headquarters is forced onto a collectivist subsidiary that values subordination of the individual to the goals of the group. A second major dimension is power distance, which dictates how a society handles inequality and hierarchy. A low power distance culture expects flatter hierarchies and frequently challenges authority. A high power distance culture is more rigid, expecting subordination and high conformity to management decisions. Shared decision-making, the core operational tenet of the borderless organization, collapses entirely when team members from these conflicting dimensions are forced to collaborate without conscious adaptation. These cultural dimensions act as invisible gravity wells. They warp standardized global workflows, proving that true borderless operations require intense, calculated cultural sensitivity. Beyond the macro-cultural differences between nations, the most restrictive borders often exist within the internal culture of the corporation itself. The return on investment for integrating a diverse workforce is rigorously documented. Organizations see marked improvements in team problem-solving, increased market share, and a distinct competitive edge in innovation. Furthermore, diverse teams actively drive down organizational costs by reducing employee turnover and mitigating expensive legal liabilities. This creates a central corporate paradox. If the strategic and financial return on cognitive diversity is absolute, why is it structurally suppressed in actual practice? The root cause of the suppression is personal bias, prejudice, and stereotyping operating at the management and operational levels. In an organizational context, bias functions as a systemic cognitive error. It disrupts the logical allocation of human talent based on preconceived judgments rather than capability. When individuals act on these prejudicial attitudes, bias becomes structural discrimination, permanently blocking the free flow of ideas. Internal human biases actively dismantle the competitive advantages of the borderless organization by artificially restricting access to the precise diverse talent the matrix needs to function. Tracking the movement of talent through these global structures produces a specific, measurable dataset. This chart shows the demographic breakdown of North American private equity employees in 2019, tracking career advancement by level. At the entry-level and associate tiers, the workforce displays a relatively balanced integration of women of color and men of color alongside white employees. Tracking the data progression upward through the organizational hierarchy into the vice president, principal, and managing director levels, that diversity steadily compresses. The glaring anomaly appears at the C-suite and board levels, the near total elimination of women of color and the absolute dominance of white men. This empirical phenomenon is known as the glass ceiling, an invisible structural barrier that separates women and minorities from top management positions. A truly borderless organization is impossible when systemic barriers prevent the most diverse, high-value talent from reaching the shared decision-making roles at the top. This chart lists countries by their glass ceiling index, proving that this barrier is a variable organizational design flaw, not an inevitability of business. The environment for working women in top-performing nations like Sweden and Norway is vastly superior to the structural realities found in lower-ranking environments like the United States or South Korea. Attempting to scale a borderless organization fails when a company assumes it can achieve global integration solely by removing geographic and supply chain barriers. Leadership must actively track and dismantle internal glass ceilings to retain the financial and strategic ROI of cognitive diversity. A truly functional global node requires high cultural adaptation, combined with uninhibited, unbiased, and continuous knowledge sharing. Managing diversity is a critical operational requirement for achieving true global scale, not an HR compliance initiative. To conquer global markets and achieve borderless efficiency, an organization must first conquer its own internal borders.